I really appreciate how far some of you have come from throughout the country to help us honor Dr. Agnes G. Doody as we dedicate the Agnes G. Doody Auditorium in Swan Hall. I'm very honored to introduce to you today the 11th president of URI. Since some of you are alumni who haven't been back in a while, I would love to tell you that Dr. Dooley joined URI in July 2009 after establishing a very impressive record as a scholar, teacher, and administrator. His professional accomplishments are many, and we are delighted with the exciting ideas and new initiatives he has brought to the university. Prior to his arrival, he served as Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Interim Provost, and Head of the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry at Montana State University. Prior to that, he was a professor and chairman at Amherst College and served on the graduate faculty in molecular and cellular biology at the University of Massachusetts, and has had visiting appointments at Stanford University and MIT. Please help me welcome our 11th president, Dr. David Dooley.
Thanks to all of you for joining us today on what really is a very special occasion in an institution, I think, that accomplishes so much and achieves so much that we actually have many opportunities to celebrate special occasions throughout the year. But this one is unique. This one we've never had the opportunity to do before. And if I guess correctly, we would probably never have an opportunity to do this again. And so thank you. Some of you I've known come from Texas, from California, and maybe even from more distant locations to be with us today. And we appreciate your presence because what we know it means, what it signifies, is your appreciation and admiration for a truly extraordinary individual. One that my wife Lynn and I have had a chance to get to know since coming to URI a year ago. And I must say we've treasured every moment that we've been able to spend with Agnes Doody since we arrived. She's been a gracious hostess for us, welcoming us to Rhode Island, sharing her hospitality, her wisdom and insight with us, regaling us with many of her stories, which we could listen to ad infinitum. And she could probably talk that long. There's no more skilled speaker, I think, at the University of Rhode Island, nor more memorable a speaker at the University of Rhode Island than Agnes Doody. And Agnes, it has been a delight to get to know you. And to get to see you, to hear you, to think with you about what URI has been and what it can be. And one of the things I admire about her so much, and I'm sure that your presence here today means that you admire her for this as well, is that you seldom run into an individual, a teacher, with such passion for the success of her students, such devotion to preparing them to being able to fulfill their hopes and dreams, and such dedication to the best that the teaching profession can be. And that's what she exemplifies. I think that's the heart of her work here at the University of Rhode Island. It's her legacy in all of her students. And I've heard and I've met a lot of people who will say to me, I love my degree at URI. I majored in nursing. I majored in physics. I majored in history. I may have majored in engineering. But one of the classes, if not the class, that I remember the most, or the experience amongst all my experiences that I remember the most, was that class I took with Agnes Doody, or working with Agnes on the debate team. That stuck with me. That I remember every day. That still resonates in my life. That still had a major impact in my success in my career, spanning all kinds of careers. Very few of us will ever be privileged to leave that kind of legacy behind. And so it is altogether appropriate that we come here to celebrate an individual whose legacy, I think, in those terms, is truly monumental. Thank you for joining us.
We are sitting in what will forever be called the Agnes G. Doody Auditorium in Swan Hall. URI named Swan Hall after Dr. M. Beverly Swan for her outstanding service as our Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs for 17 years. She served with President Robert L. Carruthers, our 10th president, who I'm very pleased to say is here. She also served as Vice Provost before that for Provost David Gitlitz, and also for Vice President William R. Ferranti, who I'm very pleased to say is also here. In fact, this room is filled with distinguished individuals. You can all look in your mirror and see another one. I'm very pleased that Commissioner Holland is here as well, who also had the pleasure of taking a course with Dr. Agnes Doody. I had the great pleasure, if you ever had a chance to hear Dr. Beverly Swan do one of her amazing poems, that you may have heard the rumor that people were actually deciding to retire a little early just so they could get one of the coveted poems. I decided on this special occasion to ask Dr. Swan, who is now Provost and Professor of English Emerita of the University of Rhode Island, to do one of her poems, and she graciously accepted the commissioning. Please help me welcome the most amazing and creative Dr. Beverly Swan.
The fact that it was commissioned doesn't make it any better. I'm really honored to be part of this well-deserved recognition of Agnes Doody, and I want to welcome you all to Swan Hall. Don't spill anything, don't write on the desks, and don't leave anything behind, because I will be watching you. And starting early next week, Agnes and I will be patrolling this building on a regular basis. And now be patient for some very bad poetry. This is for Agnes. We're here today to dedicate this room to Dr. Agnes Doody. Va-va-va-boom. You've got friends here and family who have traveled from afar because you've always been URI's shining star. Agnes joined URI's ranks. The year was 1958. She came from another campus where she was also top rate. She dressed to the nines, clothes elegant, never baggy. Not uncommon to hear, there goes our Aggie. On her bicycle with spike heels, everybody knows she's like Lady Godiva, except she wears clothes. That isn't always the case. Our Agnes is no prude. Remember the calendar for which she posed in the nude? That was for charity. Welcome House made a lot of money. Agnes is serious about her charities. She doesn't think they're funny. And then one day long ago, she wore a sleeveless blouse. The talk of the campus, she brought down the house. Summoned by Dean Browning, to his office she went. She sat there politely and listened to him vent. Many times thereafter, her bare arms could be seen. Her sense of fashion wouldn't be stopped by a dean. She silenced many a dean, chairs and presidents too, Horn, Ferranti, and Carruthers to name just a few. Dr. Dooley thinks he knows her. I hope he won't resent. Agnes doesn't always remember that she's not the president. Agnes can still make headlines thanks to a reporter named Jen. She still can be outrageous, every now and then. She's never lost her flair or her earrings or her braid. Who would ever forget what an impression she made? She coached the debate team, taught classes galore, so many students who could keep score. Speech communication was her claim to fame. Every student on campus knew Agnes's name. She's not known to lecture or use textbooks or preach. Sharing life experiences is how she chose to teach. Students learned about verbs and how to eat shrimp. Her students got strong, there was nary a wimp. She was ahead of her time, I mean really, by far. Way back in the 70s, she had an electric car. Her license plate, simply talk, one word says it all. Agnes whips all over the town, clearly having a ball. Often seen in her yard, driving the tractor, bedecked with lipstick and hat, high style always a factor. Her favorite color's purple. You won't find it on the wall, not as long as this building is still named Swan Hall. At her retirement commencement, she was the Marshal Grand, wearing academic attire with the mace in her hand. And now she's retired. That word's a joke. She still consults and gives lectures. I think she's afraid of going broke. She continues to garden, and sometimes she'll travel. Agnes would make a good judge. She wouldn't need a gavel. So greetings to our guests. And congratulations, Dr. Doody. You're one of a kind, I've said before, an American beauty. I'm going to sit down now, but I'm not saying goodbye. This is your day, Agnes, so reach for the sky. This is your day, Agnes. I'll give you all my respect, as long as you remember to continue to genuflect. This is your auditorium, and I think it's divine. Just remember, Aggie, the building is mine.
Now you know why I asked her to do the poem. We want to thank everyone here today who has donated to the newly established Agnes G. Doody Scholarship, which will support students in the Harrington School of Communication and Media. We've already received over $75,000 in gifts and pledges for the new scholarship, which, yes, thank you, which means we can award it for 2011-2012 to an outstanding student with financial need for the first time. This is a wonderful tribute to your generosity in support of our outstanding students with financial need, and also a tribute to your love and admiration for Dr. Agnes Doody, a phenomenal teacher, and for the impact that you've all described that she's had in our lives. Donations came from throughout the country and throughout the world, the latest from Japan. The names of donors whose gifts arrived after our printing deadline, we held it up as long as we could, will indeed be added to the list of donors here and the leadership donors on the plaque. And everyone who sponsors a decade, we will indeed include their names. The decade sponsorships are still open. If you haven't seen them yet, because I know people were enjoying remembrances and may not have had a chance to look at the shadow boxes, I urge you to look at them. They're not only a history of Agnes Doody's life from the 1960s to the 1990s, but they provide a glimpse of some of the events that helped shape URI and the country. We want to thank the URI Foundation and the URI Division of Advancement for helping us in support of this event and for allowing so many wonderful people to work on it. I want to thank as well our media and tech services for their support. And I want to especially express our sincere appreciation to the Doody Dedication Committee. First and foremost, alumnus Doug Rubenstein, my hero. Doug is amazing. He's volunteered his time for months and sent, I don't know, a few zillion emails when he couldn't be here in person, which he was often. Also, he worked with a very talented and dedicated committee, all motivated by love, who generously gave their time. And that includes Dr. Steve Wood, who did those amazing shadow boxes, Professor of Communication Studies. Tom Zorbedian, Associate Dean of Arts and Sciences, who worked diligently. And Joy Lewis from the President's Office. Thank you so much, and you'll get some of her delicious chocolates. I would also like to thank Ryan Carrillo from Facilities, who meticulously guided us on some very complex facilities installation issues, and Vice President Wagan for blessing some rather innovative and unusual arrangements. We really appreciate him very much. And we also appreciate Provost DeHaze, but I'll come back to him in a little bit. Representative Michael Rice, where are you? Thank you, Michael. I have something special for you, Dr. Doody. Thanks to Professor Michael Rice, a member of the Rhode Island House of Representatives. It's a citation from the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. Be it hereby known to all that the Rhode Island House of Representatives hereby offers its sincerest congratulations to Dr. Agnes G. Doody in recognition of your many years of distinguished service as a professor of communication studies and now namesake of the Agnes G. Doody Auditorium at the University of Rhode Island. The entire membership extends its very best wishes on this memorable occasion and expresses the hope for continued good fortune given this 29th day of October 2010 at the State House in Providence, Rhode Island, proposed by Representative Michael Rice and signed by Gordon D. Fox, Speaker of the House, Nicholas Mattiello, Majority Leader, and Robert Watson, Minority Leader. So congratulations. As we planned this event, and over the years, we have heard from thousands of alumni who have praised Dr. Agnes Doody for all that she gave to them in her outstanding classes, outside the classroom, in her coaching, in her advising, in her mentoring, and for everything that she did for them above and beyond the call of duty, not only throughout their college careers, but throughout their lives. Most of you know that Dr. Doody was honored with the URI Foundation Teaching Excellence Award and the Teaching Excellence Award from the College of Business Executive MBA program. She was also honored with the National Communication Association National Convention program that featured the best teachers on teaching in the country, and one entire session was just devoted to her. She was also featured in an article in a volume of essays featuring the best teachers in the country of the past century. And the awards go on and on. Most alumni noted that she gave so much of her time to help students improve their knowledge and skills and achieve their dreams. She was one of the first faculty, the first, in fact, I met, who believed in the importance of multicultural communication. Did her dissertation, in fact, on Nehru. She also was the first person I ever met who really believed strongly and lived it every day of her life in the value of diversity, that diversity helps us achieve excellence. Most have said that she helped them do and become much more than they ever thought was possible, and I include myself in that. I remember seeing Agnes working well after hours and after many had left the building, with students who needed extra guidance to catch up to their peers. Sometimes she'd talk about how their high school must have been in an impoverished community because they really didn't get some of the skills many of us took for granted. And she was determined to give them extra time so they could catch up and earn a degree. Even those who had earned that famous big purple F. We're not going to be abandoned by Dr. Doody. If anything, they were the ones she reached out to the fastest. And if they were willing to work with her, she was determined to rescue the perishing and prove to them that they could excel and perhaps even earn a purple A. As we welcome this legendary teacher and exemplary professional, we will leave this tired, old lectern that God knows how many years ago was installed in what was then Independence Hall, now Swan, and present Dr. Doody with a work of art that we commissioned in her honor, created by URI sculptor Ben Anderson and his students, and draped by Sally Shantz Dwyer from the Department of Theater. Everyone loves Dr. Doody. I'm sure you figured that out. Dr. Doody, your lectern, unlike any other in the world, just as you are unlike any other in the world, awaits you to deliver the first lecture in Agnes G. Doody Auditorium. But first we have to unveil it. And this is where I bring back Provost DeHaze. He was the chair of the committee that took our recommendation and approved it with great enthusiasm. And I really appreciate that very much, and everyone who served on that. And another reason I want to bring up Dr. DeHaze is he's of normal height. In fact, he's tall, and so is Ben Anderson, the sculptor, and there's no way I could lift this off. So please, Provost DeHaze and sculptor Ben Anderson, let's unveil Dr. Doody's lectern.
You believe this? Is this mic on, Winnie? Yeah. It should be, yes. Okay. You can move it really down. Okay. It's absolutely amazing that I'm here at all. For more reasons than one. I was a lousy student. I hated school. But I did get intrigued in the early 50s when I was a junior, senior in college with TV. And I thought, oh, that's glamorous. I think I'll try that. So with the help of my debate coach, I got into Penn State, which had one of the first programs in television. And I got in on academic probation. And he said, you've got one semester to make it. Don't screw it up. So I was all set to do TV. And the day before classes started, the head of the department called me and he said, Miss Doody, we're short one instructor for the basic course in public speaking. And while your grades aren't good, obviously you did well in public speaking and you were a distinguished debater with several awards. So we're going to ask you to take that class tomorrow. And I said, don't be ridiculous. My assistantship is in television. He said, Miss Doody, let me try again. Unless you take that class tomorrow, you have no assistantship. Reality I get. I went home, I went back to my apartment. I was just furious. And then I started getting scared. He gave me the book. He said, this is what you'll start using tomorrow. So I went into the classroom. I was so scared I couldn't sit at the desk. I sat in the third row outside seat. And then I knew I was getting 20 students and they started to come in and I couldn't believe it. They were the first batch of returning Korean vets. 16 of the 20 were older than I. And then I really got scared. And then a fellow came in, stepped over because I was on the edge, sat next to me, slid down. He said, Jesus Christ, where did you get these freaks that call themselves professors? I can't believe the shit they're handing us with these people. He introduced himself. His name was Mr. Williams, and to some of my friends in the audience, he was a Marine, and he sounded like one.
20 students came in, showtime. And then just about then, he sort of hit me on the arm. He said, "The hell with this. What are you doing after class?" He hit on me right away. "What's your name?" I said, "I'll introduce myself in a minute." And I stood up. I said, "My name is Miss Doody, and I'm your instructor for the semester." And my friend, the Marine, says, "Shit, another one." I kept the class 8 minutes. And I actually was able to get up to the desk at the next class. And I started. It was a public speaking class. They made mincemeat out of me. I mean, they were teasing me. They didn't do their work. They were, winging it. And they were laughing at me. Now, I can take a little bit. But the difference between being scared and being mad began to sink in. And I realized, I got to really get a hold of this, or I'm going down the tube. So I started, I was using purple then, and I started with the F. And I said, lousy introduction, and I started chewing them up. And I could see that I was getting a grip on them. And then it got to be exciting. Get them, all 20 of them, And it was fun. And then I was seeing how they were progressing with their speeches. Each one was getting better. And I think, this is fun. And by the end of the semester, I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I wanted to teach. And I went home at the end of that semester, Christmas, my parents, and they said, "Well, how's it going?" And I said, "Well, guess what? I've decided I want to teach for the rest of my life." Now, this is the academic delinquent that they had to raise. And my mother says, "That's a rather startling statement." I said, "No, I really want to do it." My father, who was just a fun guy, Irish, he said, "You been drinking too much Jameson?" And the answer was no. So I finished at Penn State, and I came here in 1958, and my first charge was the coaching debate. And I want to tell you this afternoon what I learned from my students. They were terrific teachers. The kids on the debate team, first of all, they had an Ivy League complex. They came up against Yale and lost. I said, "What's the matter with you?" They said, "Well, Dr. Doody, it's Yale." I said, "I know it's Yale. I can read." But I also know that they have a dean of admissions that said they can read, and our dean said you can read, so I don't want to hear any more of this stuff. I want you to start cleaning up these teams. Really? Yeah, really. So we went to work, and they were terrific. They got over what I call the Ivy League complex. And then we started winning, so we're going to tournaments. We drive to the tournaments, and we'd have all kinds of talk in the car. And we developed a philosophy, one of my debaters. He said, if you look at people, it's like a wheel. They're the hub huggers. They're afraid. They hang onto the hub. Then you get the more adventurous one. They start skipping the spokes. And then there are the rim runners. And we talked about that, and I said, that's it. That's my goal, to pry them away from the hub and get them out on the rim. And so I would say, you can do better than that, and push them and get them to take chances. And one chance I took with a debater was one of the biggest mistakes I thought I ever made in my life. He was blind, and in those days they didn't have, Disability Act. So he had a little braille machine, and we helped him with his work. And we had a debate at the what used to be the Norfolk Penitentiary outside of Boston. I don't know what they call it now. And those debaters were good because they had a lot more time to study than my debaters. And I said, "Duke, this is your moment. You are going to represent us." And he said, "Okay." And he got up on the stage, and this first affirmative debater from the prison team had a flip chart. And he started to say, "As you can see," he was not tuned in to the fact that Duke was blind. And I started to get so upset. I put this kid out there, and he's flipping his flip chart, and you can see, and he's pounding away. And you could see all the men in that audience just sucking up the air. They could see what was happening to Duke. And he finished, and Duke got up, He made his way to the lectern and he said, I appreciate so much that gentleman sharing with me his notes. It's very helpful, and now I'd like to do the same with him. Here's my Braille machine. And I said, a rim runner. And you know what I learned from him? I learned that my job was to get them as ready as they could get, or as I could get them, and then get out of the way and let them go. And so I learned a lot from the kids on the debate team. Now, I had, for some of you who have known me for years, I had some pretty lousy surgery in Yale in 1962 on a hip, and I ended up in a body cast for the whole summer and couldn't walk, in a wheelchair and all that stuff. But one day, some of the kids from the debate team came into the hospital to see me, and they said, look what we've got for you. And they put out the license plates, talk. And I said, how did you get that? I said, well, it was easy. I tell you what we did, Doc. We went into your car and we stole your registration. And we went up to the registrar, Department of Motor Vehicles, and we got a hold of someone in there and said, we have a favor to ask. Our debate coach is pretty sick in the hospital and she's in a body cast and she needs to be cheered up. So we'd like to get her special license plate. And the fellow said, well, okay. So what do you want? I said, well, we want to talk. Well, how are you going to, is she going to sign, I mean, how are you going to do this? He said, well, you're going to let us forge her name. And he said, all right. And that's what I learned from my debaters. I understood now what the phrase "only in Rhode Island" means. And then in December of that year, 62, my first husband, Arthur, and I got married. We were, as he said, we have to wait until you're well enough. I was in crutches and I made it. My kid brother, who was a mountain climber, a big guy, said, skip the crutches. I'll take you in on my arm. It was a very small wedding because of my health. We had about 10 people. And the kids on the debate team said, well, aren't you having any music or any, I said, no, it's just going to be small in the living room and all. And I was getting dressed, just about had myself pulled together, and I heard music. I said to my brother, it's coming from the living room. He said, yeah, I guess so. I'll go see what's up. He went out, and there's one of my debaters playing on the piano. He talked to me, he came back, he said, you won't believe this. 4 kids have just brought a piano in the living room, and he's like, you're going to have music for your wedding. So I learned that kids like to live on the rim, and it was really unbelievable. And then I learned from my students how sensitive they can be, how we tend to say, those kids. When I came back from the hospital, I was in a wheelchair and crutches and all that stuff, and they used to race my wheelchair down the corridors of what used to be Swan Hall, but what we all now know is Swan Hall. And they carry my books, and they were just wonderful. And I really, they expect me to recover. Because the doctor said I would probably never walk, I would probably never get in my sports car. And when I put those talk plates on that sports car, I looked at it every single day, and I said, oh, yes, I will. And I did. And then I learned another thing from another student that has never left me. He came into my office, he said, Dr. Doody, I need to talk to you. You hear that tone, you say, come in and close the door. So he said, I got to talk to you about something. I got to talk to you. I said, okay. Fine. I said, spit it out. What is it? And this is about 20 years ago, 25. He said, I'm a homosexual. I said, so? He said, well, I tried very hard not to be. I tried to change. We're a very Catholic family, and I went to the priest. Oh, that was a mistake. And then the kid held 2 part-time jobs to pay a psychiatrist's fee for 2 years to try to, we didn't say go straight, but get better. And I said, okay, it's not working. You're homosexual. That's okay. He said, well, I want to tell my parents. I said, you know, get out. Just, we didn't say come out of the closet in those days. I said, but go home and tell them. He said, well, my father will kill me. He's a jock. He's you know, he's terrible. And I said, well, I'll go home with you. And you think about that. And if you want me, I'll go. Well, he came back. He said, I'm going home this weekend. I'm going to tell my father and mother Friday night, and my 3 brothers. He said, I'm going to go alone, but would you stay near the phone just in case? And I sat by that phone all night, and it didn't ring. I thought, maybe they're listening. What happened? His fathers went berserk, but his brothers jumped between him and his father and stuck up for him. And that's when I learned from my students that my office hours, 4 hours a week, was in no way adequate. My office hours had to be 24/7. And so I always let the students know my number, where I lived every semester. And as a result of those office hours, I talked down 2 potential suicides. I spent time with gals who had problems with romance. And one gal, she kept trying to decide she liked him, and I said, well, can you live without him? She said, yeah. I said, okay. Then the answer is no. Get it. Move on. About 18 months later, this wonderful voice, this gal called. She said, I'd like to come and visit with you. I'd like her to meet my friend. And the way she said friend, I said, maybe this is the real one. And they came. He was and is charming, tall, handsome, Marine, very stable guy, which I thought she could use. And he left the room. I said, can you live without him? And she said, no. I said, nail him. They asked me to say a prayer at their wedding. I'm not on the altar very often. And then I started to involve myself with the international students. And they taught me how much they needed us to care for them because they're so far away from home. And this young man from Japan, we became very good friends. And I'm happy, and we kept up that friendship for over 30 years. And in March, he was here. He's a full professor, has a distinguished international reputation in phonetics and language. And he sat down with Dr. Doody and talked about setting up a sister relationship between our university here and theirs in Japan. And we're working on that. So I thought that was pretty great. And, yep. And then another group of students who were here, we had quite a few at that time from Iran, and I became very friendly with them. And one father brought his 2 sons here to the university, and he visited Arthur and me, thanked us so much. He was a general in the army. And then I'll never forget, he held Arthur's hands and then mine, and he said, when my sons are in this country, they are your sons. And the revolution came, Khomeini took over, and one of us had to go to one of those sons and tell him that his father had just been executed by Khomeini. And that's when I realized how much they needed a home away from home. And then another Iranian family came here, and they wanted to get their children in the local school. And so I went with them. And where they found this man who called himself assistant principal, I'll never know. I explained who we were, and he said, you university people are always trying to get these ignorant, uneducated immigrants in the school system. unless he has the right visa. I couldn't believe it. I was so embarrassed. And then I talked to the gentleman, the father of these kids. I said, remember before we came in, I told you that I might have to be the legal guardian of your children. Is that okay? And he said, yes, yes. And I'm sure he didn't know what I was talking about, but I was mad. So I said, okay. And I turned to him, I said, now, you have just heard, I am their legal guardian. You get these kids in here, and I want it done now. And we went right down the list. And I said, and I want to meet your guidance director, and I want to see that they got help today. The guidance counselor came out. She had been teaching in Tehran and came back to the United States when the revolution broke out. And she took those kids and said, come on, off they went, and they were settled. And we got outside, my Iranian friend, the gentleman, he said, oh, Dr. Doody, the way you talk to that man, I mean, he's an official. You'll get in trouble talking to the official like that. And I looked at him, I said, sir, in the United States, we are the officials. Welcome to America. And I don't know when I ever felt more proud of being an American citizen than I did to show someone that we run this country. Sometimes it gets a little rough, but anyhow. Then I had another incident that changed my life. In 1976, I was really wiped out, had disability retirement papers out, and a former student of mine who was making money hand over fist, he was one of my best debaters. I'm not surprised. He was selling stock. He was selling stocks and bonds in Europe. He came to the house and he said, I want you two to come to my New Year's Eve party in Germany, and I'll give you the money for the tickets. Now, Arthur was very offended by that. And he said, David, when we can afford to get to Germany on our own, we'll be there. And by that time, I had to go lie down because I was in quite a bit of pain. So David came and he said, Dr. Doody, what did I do wrong? Dr. Jeffrey's upset with me. I said, look, you need a new coach. I was your debate coach. Now I'm going to be your rich coach. Rule number 1, don't show green. You want people to visit you, you send them the tickets. You have to be, careful about this because people are sensitive, and Arthur is sensitive. I think the rest of that sentence could have been, but I'll take the money and fly. 4 hours later, we got a call. He went to JFK and fly home. And this is Lufthansa. Mr. Joe Doe has put 2 tickets in the mail. You will fly out on the 28th of December, and you come home when you wish. And Arthur still had his back up. He said, come on. I said, he followed rule number 1 of being rich. Don't show the money, send the tickets. I'm going, why don't you join me? So we went. And then the next day was open house, and we went to the open house, and there was only one person there. It was a man. And David said, I didn't care whether they made the New Year's Eve party. I can't stand seeing you like this. I can make a difference. This is Dr. Schwenk. I want you to give him your x-rays, and I'm going to commission him to go all over Europe and find someone who can fix you. And I said, no, that next doctor gets a hold of me, he's going to be the coroner. I've had 4 operations, and I'm crippled, I'm not doing it. And Arthur took over and said, x-rays don't hurt. We got a call in March from Dr. Schwenk. He said, I found him. He saw your x-rays and said, I can fix that. So we went over in May. I had the surgery. I met the doctor. He was fantastic. Showed us about his joints. He's, he worked with a physicist to understand stress when the joint rotates. Now, that's brilliant. Yeah, just brilliant. We liked him, and so we stepped outside. He said, you go home and talk it over. And Arthur looked at me. He said, the best mechanics in the world are Germans, and that's what orthopedic surgery is. I like him. I said, so do I. So I went back, and he thought I left my purse. And I said, no, I made a decision about the surgery. I want it. He said, so soon? I said, yeah, you make up your mind so soon? I said, yes, I have. Today's Monday, I want to come in Tuesday. I want the first hip operated on Wednesday. And his assistant said, we have other surgeries. We can't do that. And Professor Beck said, cancel them. This is an emergency. And I later found out the reason he said that. He told me, fixing a virgin joint is easy, but you were such a mess, I couldn't wait. And And I came home from that stint. I had one hip done 1 week, and I wanted the other one done the other week. He said, too much pain. I said, nonsense. Let's get it over with. And he refused. And then I said, well, suppose I was in an accident. I mean, the ambulance brought in someone with 2 broken hips from the Autobahn. Would you say, go home, come back in 6 months, we'll do the other hip? He said, no, but that's different. So I said, oh, Dr. Beck, I have been in an accident on the Autobahn. 1 hip 1 week, 1 hip the next week. And when I flew home, again, my students were absolutely wonderful. I was on crutches, and they would carry my books for me and go back to the office with me and help me. They were just terrific. And then I went from the crutches to the canes, and then 1 cane. And the day I walked in class with no canes, the kids just stood up and cheered. And I got teary, and they said, oh, skip the lesson. Let's talk about what happened in Germany. How did this on? So we talked about hips. So I ripped them off of their tuition, but they were great. And I realized how really much students give back. And then 1985 was a bad year for me. My mom died, and she was buried on the 2nd of August that year. And Arthur died very suddenly on the 4th of September. So I was really wiped out, and I took leave. And I couldn't stand being alone. So I went back to my chair, and I said, I want to cancel my leave. I want to go back in the classroom. The kids were terrific. But every once in a while, I would think of something or say something that would hit that emotional, alarm, and tears would come. And I'd say, that's it. That's all I can do today. And I'd go back to my office, and pretty soon the doors closed, and pretty soon, Doc, let's go out for coffee. And they babysat me for a whole semester. They took turns babysitting me and getting me through that course. Now, I don't know if they got their tuitions worth that semester, but I should have returned my salary in appreciation for what those kids did for me and how they pulled me through that. Another wonderful thing that happened to me, and I learned so much, was from the students in the Talent Development Program. For those of you who are not familiar, it's a terrific program we have here at URI. It started in 1968, and the aim was to help black students, and that we use, I think, the phrase people of color, but anyhow, the black kids from, the lousy schools in the state. We let the state get away with that. So I was working with the kids, and in a public speaking class, the assignment was describe a person, a place, or a thing. But when we get through, we have to see what you see. And you have to wind it up with a good, strong, concluding sentence. End with a bang, not a whimper. And this one kid was giving his presentation. He was, I think, the only black kid in the class. And he was talking about his friend. And he was from South Providence. He had the swing, and he was at ease, and he describing his friend, who was obviously a real character. And he wound up remembering that strong concluding sentence. He grinned at us, he said, man, he's a real motherfucker. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I had never heard that word in my class before. And I, frankly, had never articulated it before. And I was furious, and all of a sudden my mind kicked in. I said, wait a minute. That's his culture. That's his language. He's probably heard it at home at the dinner table. How can I get across that it's not quite acceptable here? So when I got to the critique period, I said, how many of you kids would like a job when you graduate? 100%. Here's a box. And in the box is Raytheon, Rhode Island Hospital, Citizens Bank. I put in a couple schools and nonprofit. How many of you would like to get in the box and work at one of those places? 100%. Butch, you want to get in the box? Yeah, you bet, Doc. I said, okay, what you all have to realize that part of the mission here is not only to be a good public speaker, but to develop a personal, professional persona. And language counts there. And Butch, if you want to get in the box and do this, you're going to have to understand that the word first time, the word motherfucker is not acceptable. And he rocked back in his chair. He said, no shit, Doc. So I learned then that different cultures use language differently, and if I lost my sense of humor, I'd have to quit. We had another experience in class that was very moving. One of my students came back from Thanksgiving. He's a Marine, and he had his orders. It was the Persian Gulf War, and he said, I have to leave the 1st of December. And, I said, just give me the name of your commanding officer, and I'll write a note. And he looked down at me, he said, Dr. Doody, I'm a Marine, and when you get your orders, you go. You thought he was talking to the village idiot, and I'm sure that's what he thought too. Well, so we worked. It was only 10 days left in the semester. I was able to get, the courses finished, and then he spoke at the class, one of the last classes, about going, and we had a little party for him, and we bought him a big fancy URI mug, and he thanked us, but then pointed out he's going to Kuwait where they can't drink. And this is the boob that's teaching intercultural communication. And then he spoke to us about sense of pride, sense of duty, serving the country. He was fabulous. And we had planned a little party afterwards, but by the time he got through, 90% of the kids were in tears. It was just very moving. And then this little co-ed got up and she was crying. She says, doesn't anyone want any of these cookies? And I learned from him how fortunate we are to have men and women like that hauling the load. He was just terrific, and fortunately we've been friends ever since. Then I taught in the executive MBA program. The first thing I learned about teaching in the business program is I didn't know anything. I wasn't into that. So I got very involved. I even subscribed to the Wall Street Journal, read stuff. Rick Scholl helped me. We did a lot of things to get me up to speed, and everything went well with that program. As a matter of fact, as a result of being in that program, I was on sabbatical in 1988, and I went up to the program on negotiation at Harvard for a year. I thought that we could add a dimension of negotiation, mediation in the program. It was great. And then I came back and started some courses. And I had the students in the course in negotiation describe in a journal, confidential, 2 conflicts they had experienced, watched, seen in the movies. And a lot of the kids were writing about, it was fall semester, they were writing about home. Quite a few of them were, their parents were divorced. And they talked about, in their journals, confidentially, how much they were getting to hate the holidays, because there's always a fight whether I go to mom's or I go to dad's. It was painful to read. So we cooked up a letter. It's a format I learned in the program on negotiation. The letter, first paragraph. You have to send a letter to both parents. We agree. Dear Mom and Dad, you know how much I love you. Tell how establish good relations with both parents. And then, but there's one thing that I find painful. Paragraph number 2. Every year it's a fight about Christmas. And how about if we have Christmas with Dad on the 25th and Christmas with Mom on the 27th? Can't we break away from the 25th, and can't we make it Christmas together every year? I said, you've got to write the same letter to Mom and Dad, and then the last paragraph, think it over. I'll call you next week to see how you feel about it. And I think in that class there were 16 letters that went out. And they got 16 yeses. And so that letter, I said, keep it. It's a tool. And I realized, again, they were willing to take the risk after hearing so many fights and all, and they were out there on the rim. In 1990, earth-shaking event happened. My phone rang and a voice says, this is a voice from your past. My name is Ellis. Do you remember me? I was engaged to him in 1953, 37 years. I hadn't heard from him. And I said, yeah, Ellis. He wanted me to leave graduate school and become Mrs. Beaver, and I couldn't do that. I wanted to get my PhD, and this is 1953. He said, no woman gets her PhD. I said, this one's going to. So it was a sad breakup, and evidently called the Alumni Association to find out if I was still on campus. And the gal said, yes, right here it says, Dr. Agnes G. Doody, widow of Dr. Arthur D. Jeffrey. He said, I'll give her a call. We spent just an hour. He was at the Navy base on an assignment. And then he was a radio officer on the NOR. So he was out for 4 months and then back home. So he called me from Yokohama. He said, I just found out I'm going to be home for Christmas. Would you like to spend Christmas together? I said, well, I'm going to our son's, Drew's, for Christmas, and I'm sure he'd be happy to have you join. He said, no, I don't want to meet all your relatives. I just want to finish some of those sentences we started in July. That was on the 26th. On the 28th of December, Ellis and I decided to get married. Now, think about telling your kids what you've just done. But when I went back spring semester, one of my students who had heard that I was now engaged jumped up the first day of class and said, Dr. Doody's engaged. And they said, you're kidding. And so they tracked me all semester long, wanting to be kept up to date on the wedding plans. And we had a lot of fun, and I told them about Ellis and the wonderful time we had together and so on. And the last day of class, I get very serious. I come charging in with, wrapping up the semester and getting it all. And I walked in, and the kids screamed, surprise! And they had this great big wedding bell full of little hearts that flew down. And they had this shower for me in class. Now, some of the shower gifts were a bit racy. But it was really fun. Now, some of the fellows were standing outside. They didn't know how to handle a shower. And I said, well, it's not a keg party, but, try it. It's a new experience. You'll enjoy it. We had a wonderful time. But, the nice thing about that, after grades were in, this mother called me and she said, I want to wait until my daughter's grades were in, but I want you to know that as she started telling us about your wedding plans and all, and Ellis, and she said, we couldn't wait for her to come home. And she said, my husband and I want to thank you for giving true love and romance a decent name. And I thought, wow. She said, the kids need to see that. So I decided that falling in love in front of a classroom wasn't so bad after all. And I learned from them about how they felt. Now, then there was the retirement party. And my department thought about a retirement party. And I said, no, I don't want to go to a traditional retirement party. I'll, sometimes they're funereal. Well, remember when she came? All this kind of stuff. So we had a roast and a fundraiser. And Steve Wood was chair of the department, and he pulled off a terrific party over in Newport. Now, we had an open mic during dinner. Not only did I get roasted by my former students, I got toasted and fried and smeared. I mean, they were so hilarious. And then they would turn and thank me at the end of their presentations. And I realized that night, I was saying to Ellis driving home, it was a powerful event. My students taught me how to teach. And so this afternoon, I want to share this dedication with all my former students because they put me where I am today. Thank you very much.